All right. Hey, Rio here. It is week 5, the Thursday night code up item. And I haven't been actually doing the video of me lately, mostly because I've just been in a little bit of a trying to clip through stuff. And today I felt it necessary to do so. So, by the way, this is the part of the class that you'll see I started last time is to bring up your mynotes.md markdown file and take a few notes. Okay, so I actually coded up this 137 to 158, or basically the CSS for using CSS for visual effect, and it was really great. And I was just having so much fun doing it. And I would just tell you a couple of things that I really find to be helpful. And one thing I'm concerned about is I know several of you have gotten the ebook version of this. And I know there can be a real, because of your life and, just a temptation that you can cut and paste that code rather than to type it. And I'm going to tell you honestly, I think you're hurting yourself. And yeah, for this class, yeah, you'll still get the points because how would I know, really? And it's really about, though, that's where the learning happens. That's where the magic happens. And if you're not giving yourself that time, it's really, in my opinion, not going to serve you. Okay? So I've actually, like I said, I spent part of my summer, right? I mean, going through most of this book. And this book, if I could find an analogy, and I may have said this already, but this is like a really dense, like if you're trying to eat something that's nutritionally dense, you really have to, or something, trying to eat a big sandwich, or trying to eat something that really tastes so good. If you eat it too fast, you lose something in that. Your taste buds get overwhelmed. So this is like a really amazing meal. And if you don't give it the time, not only will I think you not enjoy it, but I think you're going to miss something. And I think when you get to the develop part of this class, you may feel that. So, don't, and this is, hear this in the way that I mean it, don't cheat yourself. Don't cheat the time between you and the keyboard, okay? Because the learning happens between you reading and coding. When you read, and it's so important, I cannot emphasize how important it is to read and then do the code, because the reading actually explains why the code is written the way it is, what it's doing, and for you to then understand, integrate these concepts and take them and create something. If you haven't given that juicy sandwich enough of your time, you're going to find, I believe, and I'm not hoping this on anyone, and part of this also depends on how much background you have and all that. So I want you to take a few notes, give me your experience of doing the code up experience, because it's all important. Honestly, I've said this before, so I'm not going to go over that. Every piece of this is important. And yes, I run a very structured class, because honestly, that's part of coding, is knowing, following a structure, staying in that structure, and staying focused. So the other thing, and I'm going to move over here in a minute and show you this, but there's something called grit. And if you haven't listened to a TED Talk, I highly recommend this TED Talk from Angela Duckworth. And I actually make my CIT15 students watch it almost the first or second week of the semester, because I find it to be really important to understand your own level of grit. And yesterday, after I was right at the end of coding, and it was like, wow, that's so cool. Again, seeing it, right? So this is like the third time probably I've been through some of this code. And it really, honestly, really started to I got it on the third time. So giving yourself the ability to do that. But here's my point too, is that when I was at the end, there was a mistake, and I couldn't figure out why. My very last part of, of the autogram, and I'll show you the part that I'm talking about, would not work. And it was so frustrating. And I actually ended up, the time I had allotted, because my goal yesterday was to actually code up and then record right after, so the concepts were fresh in my brain. But that didn't happen because the time I had to spend troubleshooting to try to figure it out, I had students coming in, which is awesome. Awesome. Thank you for coming in. My point is, I want you to come see me, because actually that's going to be one of my parting comments too, is that having somebody else look at your code, way important. And I'm going to show you a technique I used to actually help me find the bug that I had in my code. But doing that, right, so that process was frustrating. And so I had meetings yesterday. I had classes. I went to a meetup last night, by the way, awesome, on TensorFlow. If you don't know about TensorFlow, Google TensorFlow, which is really the new machine learning library. Not new, but more used. And there was a talk on it last night. It was so good. So I know this is going a little further than I may, and I may end up breaking this into 2 videos, because I also want to go over, because it's Friday for me of week 4, and I just finished watching or grading the work that you all did last night. And there's some good work happening in this class, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you create, and that's exciting for me. But back to this, so last night when I got home, I didn't get home until, I don't know, 8:30, and it was like that bug that it wasn't working stuck in my head, and I couldn't go to sleep until I did it. And I finally figured it out around 10 o'clock. And it was so interesting to see the error that I made. And it was because on that particular line, I was just, being a parrot. I was just reading it and typing it without understanding it. And that's my whole concept that I'm trying to get to you. And because we're not in face-to-face, right, we're online, that sometimes gets lost. And because you don't have somebody that you actually have to describe that or ask questions of, it'll be easy to sometimes think, oh, it's not going to hurt me. And I will say I think it does. So anyway, let me go ahead and get through showing you how I troubleshooted my code, and I think I will end up stopping before I get to the feedback part, reading over the feedback part, because I want to actually put that possibly on next week's item. Okay. So I'm actually going to switch over to my Windows side, because that's what I do, is I actually I code up into the Windows side to A, as I said before, make me do it, because sometimes it's like I don't want to code on the Windows side, I want to code on the Mac side. It's so good for me. And the more I use VS Code, the more I like it. So here was the issue I was having. My code, my autogram, was not doing the very last step. Let me just show you what I mean. Oh, and by the way, I changed this. I played with this today too. Another lesson learned. I won't go into about why version control is so cool, and why did I not do it over the work I did over the summer. Anyway, on the autogram, I love this, right? So this is one of the first things you learn about, is the hover, the pseudo class. And I love that they taught you how to do inspect and come over and have the state, right? So that you can add the state, so that you can have it show you the hover. Where's it at? Which one is it on? That it actually keeps the hover state on. It depends on which one I'm on. I think, let me make sure. Yeah. So in this case, right, if I inspect, and the idea that you can have the hover state be on, maybe I'm not selecting the right thing here. Yeah, I gotta select A to get that to work. So I just love that they show that. I think that's really helpful to understand, what, oh, there it is. I don't know, I have hover on. So it's actually good. It should be in the A rough. But anyway, you get it when you actually end up being in there. Actually, I'm going to pause because I want to figure out what I'm doing here. Yeah, so that was good. It is actually, and this is good, right? So it's going back and figuring out where that hover or where that scale, and that's what you learned in the chapter, was how that style is handled on the thumbnail item. And so I was just clicking. It was making in my mind. It was like, oh no, it's on the AREF. No, it's not. It's on actually the LI, right? So that's when you would, and that's why doing it and then reflecting on what it's doing and re-looking at the code and understanding it is such an important process. I just can't, again, underscore enough why that's important. And learning dev tools is also one of those things that you just can't argue. You can't get enough of because there's just so much in there, right, to do. So anyway, it was that point, though, it was this zoom right there. It was not happening. And I could not for the life of me, and I tried everything. I made sure I walked through my code, right? So that was the other thing is, and by the way, making sure my event listeners were working. That was, and by the way, you can also always look down in here and look at your event listeners and do like on click and see where it's happening, right? So you have keys up. So there's a couple of event listeners now on here, right? So that when you hit the escape key. So anyway, but it was this zoom. It was and I love the effect. It was wonderful. So here's what happened. When I was coding, it took me, this is what took me a while to find. I had in my code where it's supposed to be transition, had typed transform, and then within there, right? So you have so there's your CSS, and then I had just typed transform and didn't see it. And it was so hard to find. So what did I do after I got home last night is I finally, because I knew it was in here, is I looked up the way to compare code. So I got the solution file and I looked at, and luckily it was at the end. But even if you're not at the end, and I'm going to recommend this as we get also into the next part of this class, because the code gets even more involved. But it was really cool. So what I do is you can just select, and you say select for compare, and then you select the next file you want to compare, and then what it does is it puts them side by side. And that was just really, really helpful. It was like so, I was like, okay, lesson learned, thank you very much. I should have done that earlier, right? After I've gone through everything and looked at the code and followed it through, if it still didn't work, it's just something syntactically that was hard to find, and in my case that was true. Okay, so I think I will just go over now the work that you all need to do for this last part of this. Just not go over it because you can see that here, but most of you are getting my commit messages as far as the places in the book, right? And again, if you're on the digital, sometimes it's hard, right? I actually, you have to actually, yeah, if you're not, I didn't realize this until somebody told me that on the electronic version you have no page numbers. So what you might do is then just search. But again, I highly, highly, highly recommend you read the chapter and then you code, or you code and then you read the chapter, whatever works, right? I want to make sure you do that. So make sure you get all of these points, all these commit points, because I do take off a few points. If you give me one commit, right, that's not the idea, as I want. And really it's also the idea, it's the moment you take to also reflect upon that thing that you learned, right? And it's just another moment in that, make sure you think about what's going on. Okay, so I think that's, again, make sure when I see your work. So for this case, right, for the one that we're in, I had actually planned on doing some more work on my design, but I ended up having to spend a ton of time doing, anyway, I won't go into why, but I want you to now think about, as I said before, placing or integrating your design into the practice part of this class. into the learn part. Of course, you can't in the develop and you can't in the imply because these already have their own designs. But, I want you to then think about that, right, as to how you would make that. So what I mean is that on, right, back here, and I will do the same, I promise, is on, like on this, then pull that design, implement that design through the practice and the learn part of this. And that's kind of why I liked my layout. And this actually looks a little windowy. So it's like, okay, not a fan of the tile, but in this case, I kind of liked it. I still want to play with it and do some other things. Matter of fact, what I'm thinking of is that when I'm on the learn part of this, I'm going to actually make this like half the screen, put the content over here, and then maybe layer, like put learn at the first, and then put the other ones lined up. Anyway, I have some ideas I want to play with there. So that's it. That's it. So what I will do is I'm going to stop this video, like I said, and I will record then because I got some great feedback and I just want to go over that about the develop 1 and 2. But I think I want to kind of isolate that into that. Here's my concern. I'll be honest with you, right? So here's my concern is if I do a video that I don't have until that week, you're not going to watch it. Right? So I might actually look at this for the next item coming up next week, right? So what I mean by that is I'm going to go here and look, just because now that I'm thinking about it, I think it'd be good to say this. So this is week 5, right? So here we are. So this is next week for you. You're working on here. And then, so what I might do is actually, because here you have the week after is your first develop it, right? So maybe that'll give me a chance to, maybe I'll do it here because there's nothing quite new here. And maybe what I'll do is place it here, and that way if you want to check ahead, you want to do that just to go over and clarify any questions because some of you had some really good questions about that. All right, enough for today. T today is for Texas. I have friends and good friends in Texas, and it's been hard watching. I mean, hard for them, not hard for me, but yeah, kind of hard for me to watch. And now we have, earthquakes and fires and stuff. And sometimes it's easy to look at the world and think it's all falling apart. I don't believe that. It's not my belief of what's going on, but it can seem that way. So just know that the world is okay, that you're okay, and you can focus on this stuff and just keep moving ahead. That's really an important part of grit. And so again, I'm going to recommend, matter of fact, here it is. Watch that video. I definitely say watch that video. All right, enough for today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.